Remember, when you click on a button to create a subroutine, the program automatically creates this private subroutine. And the important thing to remember is that the name of the actual subroutine is not important. It's important to give it a good name, but it's not the name of the subroutine that decides when it executes. It's actually the handles that decide when the program is run, when the subroutine is run. So in this example here, the handles are button1.click and button2.click. That means this subroutine is going to be run when either button1 or button2 is clicked. A note on methods. Methods act on the particular object that they're for, and certain types of objects will have certain types of methods. So for example, for the type of object of a text box, it has the method clear that we can use to clear the text box. When we use this method, it is going to act on the text box, the particular text box we've specified. So in this case, it's going to act on text box 1. So we always put the name of the text box first, dot the method. A note on declaring variables. We have to declare variables before we can use them. So here we want to use this variable speed and variable distance. We have to tell the program, save a portion of memory for us to keep these variables in that location. We don't have to declare objects and things that we've put on our form. So text boxes and check boxes and buttons, we don't have to declare those because when we put them on the form, the program already knows to save memory. But when we want a variable to hold a value for some in-between calculation that we're going to do in the program, then we have to tell the program to save a spot in memory for the variables that we want to use. And we do that using either the dim statement or the const statement. The statement is used for variables, the const statement is used for constants. So we have to use the dim, we have to give the variable a name, which should be a good name that's descriptive, starts with the lowercase letter for the first word, an uppercase letter for the second word, and then we have to tell it what type of variable. So is it a double, which is a number? Is it a string, which means something that is text, such as in this case, Ontario is a string, and we put it in quotes. After we declare variables, then we can give them a value. So, for example, the variable driver name that we declared up here as a string variable, I can then give a value to by saying driver name equals Brandine. Now the value of Brandine is stored in driver name. So it's always the variable on the left that is getting the value from whatever's on the right. Remember, we can add strings so that if we wanted to combine our first name, our nickname, and our last name, but we wanted the nickname to be in quotes, we could use the ampersand character to add the next thing, which in this case is character 34, and character 34 happens to be the quote character. Then we add the nickname, then we add another quote, then we add the last name with space before it. And doing that would put Brandine space quote Brandy quote space McDonald in the text box. If statements are used to make decisions, in this small program we've declared two variables, num1 and num2. We've said that they're doubles, which means they could have a decimal point. In our case, we've used the numbers 3 and 5, so we could have declared them as integers. But if the user is providing the value and you wanted the user to be able to have to give you a number with a decimal point, you would have to use double. So first we declare the variables, then we initialize the variables, which means to give them a starting value. If we don't do this, they'll have numbers would have a starting value of 0. So in this line we set num1 equal to 3. In this next line we set num2 equal to 5. Then we have an if statement, and the if statement is making a decision based on the condition. So the condition in this case is num1 less than num2. If this is true, the first commands that follow will be executed. Else, meaning if it's not true, the next thing will be executed. So in our case here, num1 is 3, num2 is 5. So 3 is less than 5, it's true, and we execute the first statement that says put the string num1 is smaller in text box 1. A select case statement is similar to an if statement in that it's looking at conditions, and depending on which condition is true, it's going to execute whatever portion of code is in that section. In this particular select case block, it's looking at the variable mynum. And mynum, the variable, gets its value from textbox1.text. Now, because text boxes contain text, and text is a string, before we can get that value and give it to the variable mynum, we have to convert it to a double. So even though text box 1 might contain the number 2, that number 2 is still considered a piece of text. So we have to tell the program, take that number 2 and convert it to a double, which means convert it to a number, and then save that 2 in the variable mynum. Then this case statement is going to look at mynum. Now if mynum has the value 2, it's going to jump to case 2, where 2 represents the value of mynum. And it's going to execute this next statement, which says change the text in text box 2 to say there are 2 items. So the select case portion is where you list the variable you want the case to look at. The individual cases are where you say, okay, what are the possible values for that variable? The case else is the last case, and it's the case that you want to do if none of the other cases are true. So if we go down, say suppose mynum was 4, as we go down this list, it's not 1. So we check the next one, it's not 2. We check the next one, it's not 3. Okay, we do the case else. For next loops are used when we want to do a particular thing a certain number of times. And they're often shortened just to be called for loops. So in the for loop below, well, in the setup to the for loop, first we dimension or declare I as an integer, and then we're clearing a text box. Now in the for loop says for I equals 1 to 5. That means that whatever's in this loop is going to execute 5 times. The first time I is going to be 1. The second time I is going to be 2. The third time I is going to be 3, then 4, then 5. And then that loop is going to stop and the rest of the program will just carry on. But in this case, the program ends. So the first time through the loop, I is 1. And we append the text in text box result with this string right here. So this string is I times 2 with a carriage return added next to it. So the first time through I is 1, this is going to equal 2, and what goes into our text box is a 2, and then the cursor jumps to the next line and just waits. The next time through the loop, I is 2, I times 2 is going to be 4, and 4 plus a carriage return goes into the text box. And this happens every time through the loop. The last time through the loop, I is 5, I times 5 is 10, and what gets added to the text box is a 10 and a carriage return.